On the morning of July 3, 1929, Detroit police officers responded to a call at the home of Benny Evangelista, located at 3587 St. Albans Street. What they discovered inside would shock the entire city and leave a haunting legacy for decades to come. Vincent Elias, a real estate dealer, had arrived at the house around noon. He planned to sell a farm in Marine City, Michigan to Evangelista, and he had come to the home to close the deal. He knocked on the door, and receiving no response, he entered the home but abruptly stopped as he confronted a scene of unimaginable horror. Evangelista was seated in an overstuffed chair behind the desk in his office, hands in his lap as if folded in prayer, but his head, severed from his body, lay grotesquely on the floor. 3 framed photographs had been positioned around the head. This gruesome sight was only the beginning. Police arrived at the home, and they ventured into a scene of unparalleled brutality. The terror continued upstairs, where Evangelista's wife, Santina, was found in the master bedroom. She had been partially decapitated and dismembered, her intact arm still clutching the body of her infant son, Mario. The neighboring bedroom held a similar scene. Here, the 3 young daughters of Evangelista, Angeline, Margaret, and Eugenia, lay slaughtered. The entire family had been wiped out in a night of unspeakable violence. It was a massacre steeped in mystery. As police continued their search, their horror deepened. In the basement of the home, they uncovered a dark, foreboding altar with grotesque idols of worship and a crazed, occult manuscript. This unsettling discovery hinted at a malevolence that ran deeper than the brutal murders upstairs. What forces had been unleashed in the Evangelista home, and what horrors still lingered in its shadow? Benny Evangelista, born Beniamino Evangelisto in Naples, Italy in 1885, was a man whose life was shrouded in mystery from the very start. Little is known about his early life, but his journey from Naples to America would set the stage for a haunting and secretive life steeped in the occult. In 1904, 19 years old and seeking new opportunities, Evangelista emigrated to America with his brother Antonio. They settled in Philadelphia, and he changed his name, hoping to better fit into American society. Evangelista began working as a carpenter, which provided him with a stable income at the time. The relationship between the brothers was close at first, but it began to deteriorate as Evangelista experienced and shared visions that he believed were divine in nature, claiming they were messages from God. Antonio adhered strictly to their Catholic upbringing, and he believed these visions were blasphemous and heretical. As the divide between the brothers increased, so did Evangelista's obsession with his spiritual visions. He began to look for answers by exploring mysticism and the occult, and he likely discovered the culture of pow-wow, a blend of folk magic and Christian mysticism. Pow-wow originated with German immigrants who arrived in colonial Pennsylvania. The practice became prominent following the Revolutionary War. The area was impoverished, uneducated, and wounded from the atrocities of the war. The term pow-wow originated from the Algonquin Native Americans, but it was repurposed by the Pennsylvania Dutch. Pow-wow practices included a variety of rituals, charms, and spoken formulas intended to heal the sick, protect livestock and crops, and ward off evil influences. The use of written charms, amulets, and specific verbal incantations was common in its practice. For example, practitioners believed they could treat a fever by turning their shirt inside out for 3 mornings while praying, "Turn thou shirt, and fever likewise turn. I tell thee this in the name of God the Father, Son, and Holy Ghost." The culture of pow-wow in Pennsylvania may have served as a springboard for Evangelista to explore his visions while still remaining within the framework of his Catholic upbringing. However, this exploration of the occult would take him to a much darker place. Evangelista's occult interests and practices continued to grow, which his brother could no longer tolerate. Antonio insisted his brother join a railroad construction crew, effectively ostracizing him from the family. Evangelista relocated to York, Pennsylvania. Although fatigued by the physical demands of his job, he continued to be haunted by his visions. It was on the railroad crew that Evangelista met Aurelius Angelino, a fellow immigrant from Naples. The two men formed a close bond over their shared heritage and mutual fascination with the occult. It was almost as if Evangelista had found a new brother, one who was accepting of his mystical interests and practices. But their interest drew them deeper into the shadows of the occult, blurring the line between mysticism and madness. One night in 1918, Angelino returned home consumed by a silent rage. He beat his wife unconscious, and according to a newspaper article from 1923, he misused his children horribly. Following this, Angelino was committed to the county insane asylum. At the time, his wife and 2 children were cared for by community services. Distraught and empathetic, she sought a local attorney to petition for his release with the hopes of returning to Italy as a family. In May 1919, Angelino was released, and he returned home to his wife and 4-year-old twins, Edwig and Aufergie. His wife requested that he watch the boys while she visited the neighbor. When she returned 15 minutes later, she found Angelino raving in the front yard, attempting to sell what he referred to as fresh meat. Horrifically, she discovered that he had slain the twins by battering their heads with a club. He had butchered their remains, then attempted to market the meat to passers-by. Angelino was apprehended, and in 1921, a jury acquitted him for the murders on the grounds of insanity. He was committed to another insane asylum, and after escaping once, he was moved to the Fairview Asylum for the criminally insane in Wayne County. Angelino escaped again in 1923, and he was never recaptured. His wife remarried to Adrian Bartholomew, and in 1925, their new home was destroyed in an explosion and pursuant fire. The police established protective patrols and guards, fearing that this was the work of escaped lunatic Aurelius Angelino. Seeking to escape the horrific and traumatic memories of this descent into madness, Evangelista moved to Detroit. He sought to establish a new life, but the darkness that had embraced Angelino continued to haunt him. Evangelista returned to carpentry, and using his earnings, he ventured into real estate investment. He married a woman named Santina, whom he claimed to have won through his occult practice. Accounts vary, but a newspaper article from 1929 recorded an interview with the family's physician, Dr. Alf Thomas, who speculated that the Evangelista children were from Santina's previous marriage. The physician also claimed to believe that Evangelista was insane. Despite the shadows that lingered in his past, Evangelista's life in Detroit appeared prosperous. With his apparent success in finances and romance, he marketed himself as a divine prophet and faith healer. His occult practice was becoming a business of its own. It's speculated he was nearing 70 visits per day, charging up to $10 per visit, which was the equivalent of 1 to 2 days' pay for the average worker at the time. The income from his carpentry, real estate dealings, and occult consultations allowed the Evangelista family to move to 3587 St. Albans Street, a 2-story house at the intersection of Mack Avenue. This new residence symbolized his financial success and seemed to mark a new chapter in his life. Yet beneath the surface, the sinister practices he had embraced in Pennsylvania continued to grow, setting the stage for the tragic events that would soon unfold. Their home was located on the east side of what was deemed the Italian colony of Detroit. Like his brother, Antonio, the community staunchly upheld Catholic values. Many of his neighbors were first-generation immigrants struggling to forge a new life thousands of miles away from the world they had known. On the cusp of the Great Depression, many struggled financially and socially, and despite their religious upbringing, they turned to Evangelista for supernatural solutions to their problems. They sought spiritual healing or protective hexes. They bought potions or tinctures to cure their maladies. They wanted a clairvoyant to look into their future and predict better circumstances. With Evangelista's growing affluence, he had more time to devote to his occult practices. He wrote the first of a 4-volume series titled The Oldest History of the World Discovered by Occult Science, which he recorded in a trance-like state. It was a record of his visions, what he believed to be divine revelation. He described it as follows: the first volume covered 4,305 years before our first father, Adam, to 1,116 years after the birth of Adam. An abbreviated preface of the volume reads, "My story is from my own views and signs that I see from 12 to 3 a.m. I began on February 2nd, 1906 in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and it was completed on February 2nd, 1926 in the city of Detroit, county of Wayne, state of Michigan. On this new earth, the last one was created by God, the Father Celestial, and the great prophet Meal. We call it today the Great Union Federation of America. I am with the power of God, and I respect this nation. In this book, I shall express all my views of the past 20 years. In this great continent, we are all the generations. By the willingness of God, my respect to this nation, I shall do my best to tell you of the old world." One haunting and prescient phrase lingered on a page of this manuscript: "I shall be back." His book described a world where celestial beings influenced the course of human events, where hidden energies and unseen forces shaped the destiny of mankind. His writings were filled with elaborate diagrams of mystical symbols, celestial alignments, and metaphysical concepts that he believed were revealed to him during his trances. Evangelista's followers and clients, many of whom were already captivated by his supposed psychic abilities and healing powers, found the book to be both fascinating and perplexing. They continued to return for occult protection, and they began to study his writings. It provided a framework that tied together his various practices and beliefs, positioning him as a prophet. These believers joined the Union Federation of America, a growing cult with Evangelista at the helm. As his followers grew, so did his aspirations. He developed business cards that read Mr. Benny Evangelista, Divine Prophetile, author and private history writer. And while his consultations would take place in his office, using his desk as an altar, he was determined to build a more official inner sanctum in his basement. This hidden chamber featured a modest Rococo altar at the back of the room, surrounded by a worship area where followers could kneel and receive his ministrations. The altar was equipped with knives of varying sizes, their blades often stained with the remnants of previous rituals, rumored to be animal sacrifices. Crucifixes, candles, and incense adorned the room, creating a somber and mystical atmosphere. Shelves displayed his potions and scrolls, while the walls and ceiling were draped in an eerie green fabric, leaving only one window uncovered, which opened up to St. Aubin Street. In one transept, Evangelista had painstakingly crafted a model of the solar system from papier-mâché, hanging the planets from the ceiling. At the center, he placed an electrically wired sun that glowed ominously, which he referred to as the Eye. The other transept featured bizarre and grotesque idols and statues of celestial beings from his religion, which he had handcrafted from wood, clay, and papier-mâché. These materials contributed to their crude and unsettling appearance. The figures, depicted in exaggerated and hideous proportions, hung from the ceiling or were affixed to the walls, creating a nightmarish tableau that dominated the room. They were gigantic, and they towered over those in the room, looking down on worshippers with crooked, outstretched arms, on which Evangelista had pasted locks of hair clipped from the vicious dogs he kept chained in his yard. He named this surreal display of planets and figures the Great Celestial Planet Exhibition. The basement altar was the heart of Evangelista's occult world, believing it to be a portal through which he could access hidden knowledge and ancient power. He conducted prolonged chants, ritualistic sacrifices, and sought to uncover the real meaning of his visions. A month before his death, he invited non-believers to a 5-cent tour of his exhibition, hoping to recruit and grow his cult further. The police investigation of the Evangelista home began on July 3, 1929, as they began sifting through the remnants of a nightmare. They found Evangelista in his office, decapitated. Strangely, his clothes had been straightened post-mortem. 3 framed photographs had been placed around the head. These were photos of Evangelista's deceased son inside his coffin, adding a macabre touch to the already ghastly scene. Police theorized that Evangelista was slain first during the night. Multiple blows had to have been delivered to kill him, but they believed this could have been done noiselessly so as not to wake the rest of the family. Scattered across the desk were manuscript pages that Evangelista had been developing on the self-punishment rites of his cult. The police also discovered several pieces of women's underwear tagged with the names of the owners. One newspaper speculated that this was likely used for rituals to find missing persons. They recovered several threatening letters in his office, the most recent of which was from 6 months earlier and simply read, "This is your last chance." These letters may have been written by the mafia-like organization known as the Black Hand, which will be discussed later. Several footprints marked the killer's route from Evangelista's office through the kitchen to the second-floor bedroom. The footprint was described as dainty, but due to the violent nature of the crime, they believed the man must have been quite strong. They continued their investigation upstairs. In the master bedroom, they discovered Evangelista's wife, Santina, with their infant son Mario. Santina was badly mutilated, her body ripped with deep lacerations. She had been nearly decapitated, her head hanging off the side of the bed, and her arm had deep cuts near the shoulder, nearly severing the limb. It was as though the killer was trying to amputate it. Santina appeared to have been asleep until the moment of the attack. The 18-month-old Mario lay in the bed with his mother, her intact arm still clutching the body of the infant. His head had been crushed with a heavy object. Shocked, the investigators continued to the neighboring bedroom, which should have served as a sanctuary for the 3 Evangelista daughters, but it had been transformed into a slaughterhouse. They found 5-year-old Margaret and 4-year-old Eugenia side by side in the bed, their bodies slashed in a frenzied and merciless attack. The body of 7-year-old Angelina, dressed in a bathrobe and white silk nightgown, was found on the floor near the doorway, suggesting that she had woken up during the attack and tried to flee. She had been struck in the head several times. The sheer violence of the scene was overwhelming. Each child's body bore evidence of multiple blows, indicating a prolonged and vicious assault. One of the children's arms was severed at the shoulder, a testament to the killer's relentless rage. The direction of the blows suggested the assailant was left-handed. The police were perplexed by the lack of blood spatter on the walls and doors, considering the extent of the injuries. This indicated that the suspect must have been covered in blood when he left the house. This added a layer of mystery to the crime scene, raising questions about the killer's method and movements. However, the police did discover a single bloody fingerprint on the doorknob, one of the few pieces of physical evidence left behind by the perpetrator. This clue though small, was crucial in piecing together the events of that night and identifying potential suspects. Further examination of the house revealed that no money, jewelry, or papers had been taken, ruling out robbery as a motive. However, it was discovered that a Spanish machete that decorated the wall of Evangelista's office had been missing and could have been used as one of the murder weapons. Many modern reports on the case cite an axe as the murder weapon. However, investigators and medical examiners at the time reported that the weapon of choice was never identified, and they speculated that it could have been a large, heavy knife. The investigation inside the Evangelista home revealed a chilling blend of occult worship and brutal violence, leaving investigators with more questions than answers. The aftermath of the Evangelista murders on the Detroit community was profound and far-reaching. The gruesome nature of the crime sent shockwaves through the Italian colony, leaving an indelible mark on the collective consciousness of its residents. The close-knit community, bound by shared heritage and religious faith, found itself grappling with an unprecedented horror that shattered their sense of security and trust. The Evangelista family was laid to rest in a funeral attended by over 3,000 mourners. The sheer number of attendees was a testament to the profound impact the family had on their community, as well as the collective grief and fear that permeated the city. The service, held at San Francesco's church, was a somber occasion marked by tears and whispered prayers, as friends and strangers alike came together to mourn the loss and seek solace in their faith. The police attended with hopes of identifying leads, but they noticed nothing out of the ordinary. Fear and paranoia gripped the neighborhood. Some speculated that the murders were the result of a curse or dark ritual gone wrong, while others feared a killer was still on the loose. Just a few weeks earlier, a mother and 2 children were slain by an axe murderer. Mary Chapinski, 28, was found in the bushes 20 feet from her 3-room wooden shanty. Her children were found in their beds. Police worried the 2 murders were connected. Investigators searched for any links between the Chapinski and Evangelista cases, but despite the apparent similarities, no definitive evidence emerged to link the 2 crimes directly. The lack of clear connections only deepened the mystery and heightened the sense of fear and uncertainty within the community. Many families left the neighborhood, just as Evangelista had left York, desperate to escape the stigma of a grotesque crime. For some, the fear was even more intense. 4 days after the murders, a 36-year-old mother of 5 became so terrified that the killer was still on the loose that she leapt from the 10th floor of a downtown office building, ending her life in a desperate act of escape from the perceived danger. The immediate aftermath of the Evangelista murders saw Detroit's police force launching one of the most intensive investigations in the city's history. The horror of the crime scene, combined with the sensational nature of the victims' lives, demanded swift and thorough action. The initial focus of the investigation was on those who had had recent contact with Benny Evangelista. Given his role as a landlord, faith healer, and occult practitioner, the list of potential suspects was extensive. Police would come to interrogate and interview over 150 suspects. Investigators examined Evangelista's tenants. A number of them had reasons to hold grudges against their landlord, from disputes over rent to dissatisfaction with the properties. Evangelista was involved in several real estate lawsuits at the time, but his lawyer stated that these were only minor cases. One former tenant was accused by a vengeful ex-wife, but after comparing his fingerprints against those on the doorknob, the suspect was cleared. None of the leads with his tenants panned out, and the police moved on with their investigation. The police were keenly aware of the potential involvement of the Black Hand, a notorious criminal organization run by Sicilian and Italian immigrants between 1890 and 1920. The Black Hand was infamous for sending threatening notes adorned with the symbol of a black hand, a dagger, or other menacing imagery. These notes promised death and destruction if recipients did not pay for protection. and several letters were found in the Evangelista home. Detroit's Italian community had seen the violent reach of the Black Hand before, and some of these incidences reflected the Evangelista massacre. For example, in 1917, Giuseppe Iaio, known as Joseph Ellen, was murdered with an axe near Oak Hill Cemetery in Battle Creek. However, some speculate that the media's portrayal of the Black Hand amplified its presence. The mystique and menace captured in the newspapers may have led to copycat criminals who used the label of the Black Hand to ensure the success of their extortion attempts. Many threats attributed to the Black Hand often had mundane explanations. In the case of the Evangelistas, the threatening letters and brutal crime scene fit the Black Hand's modus operandi, but investigators could find no concrete evidence to connect the threatening letters to the heinous crime. Police considered the possibility that the crime was religiously motivated. They speculated that it could have been the work of a rival madman, and this line of inquiry led them to a man named Robert Harris, who was arrested 3 years after Evangelista's death. Robert Harris, who claimed to be the king and god of the Asiatic nation, had created a bizarre and dangerous cult in Detroit. He preached that his followers were destined to rule the world and promised heavenly rewards if they adhered to his teachings. Harris referred to himself as the King of Islam and conducted his cult activities in several buildings through Detroit that were believed to be fraternal lodges. One such temple featured 100 regulation theater seats, all facing an altar. Harris's followers were instructed to kill devils in exchange for divine forgiveness and reward. The cult's doctrine was extreme and violent. Any member found revealing the secrets of their beliefs or practices was sentenced to death. Harris was arrested for sacrificing a follower during one of his rituals. He and several other followers restrained the man, beat him in the head, and stabbed him in the heart as part of their bizarre ministrations. Despite the compelling parallels, the investigation hit a wall. Harris's fingerprints didn't match those recovered from the Evangelista door, and thus Harris was cleared as a suspect in the murders. Umberto Tecchio emerged as a prime suspect in the investigation. Along with his friend Angelo Depoli, Tecchio had visited Benny Evangelista the day before the murders to make the final payment on a house he had purchased. The two men stayed at a nearby boarding house where the police later discovered an axe, a banana knife, and freshly cleaned boots in the barn behind the residence. Tecchio's violent history added to the suspicion. Just 3 months prior, he had stabbed his brother-in-law to death. Tecchio was arrested and subjected to extensive questioning, but he adamantly maintained his innocence, prompting the police to interview other residents of the boarding house for corroboration. They claimed that Tecchio had returned around 8 p.m. the night before the murders, providing him with a strong alibi. As a result, Tecchio did not face prosecution, and he died of pneumonia in 1934. However, a new twist emerged after Tecchio's death. A newsboy named Frank Costanza confided in a friend and later to the police that he had seen Tecchio on the front porch of the Evangelista home at 5 a.m. on July 3rd, shortly after the murders. Fear for his life had kept Costanza quiet, but with Tecchio no longer a threat, he finally divulged his secret. In 1935, Fred Fromm, the chief of detectives, ordered a re-examination of Tecchio's fingerprints against those found on the doorknob at the crime scene. Lead investigator Charles Carmody noted that there were similarities in 2 characteristics between Tecchio's fingerprints and those from the doorknob. Fromm and other investigators claimed that Carmody had not mentioned these similarities during Tecchio's initial arrest in 1929. Upon reviewing the case, they discovered that 2 witnesses who had substantiated Tecchio's alibi at the boarding house had never been seriously interviewed. It was upon revisiting the case that they officially corrected the record to the newspapers. They believed the murder weapon was likely a long, heavy knife. Despite the development with Umberto Tecchio, there remained one more suspect, and this theory was even more bizarre than any of the others. Among the most chilling suspects considered by the police was Aurelius Angelino. He had escaped from the Fairview Asylum for the Criminally Insane in 1923, and he was spotted by a pedestrian headed toward Lancaster. The police had previously speculated that he may have been responsible for the explosion and fire that destroyed the home of his ex-wife in 1925. By 1929, Angelino had faded into obscurity, his whereabouts unknown. However, the brutal similarities between the murders of the Evangelistas and Angelino's earlier crimes led investigators to revisit his case. Both murders involved the savage killing of family members and the frenzied butchering of their remains. Strangely, Detroit authorities exhumed Evangelista's body 8 months after the massacre. They found that his fingerprints resembled those marked in blood on the walls of the cabin where Angelino had killed his children in Lancaster, Pennsylvania in 1919. Could it be that Evangelista was somehow involved in the murders of the Angelino children? The discovery reignited speculation about the relationship between Angelino and Evangelista. Could Angelino have tracked down his former friend and exacted a horrific form of revenge? Given both men's deep involvement in the occult, they might have entered into a dark covenant. Perhaps Angelino believed that Evangelista had broken his pact, or that some malevolent force demanded a final gruesome payment. Perhaps Angelino had been driven into madness by their previous ceremonies, and he was motivated by a twisted sense of retribution to fulfill an otherworldly demand for blood. Among the most bizarre and unsettling theories that emerged during the investigation was the idea that Benny Evangelista and Aurelius Angelino could have been the same person. Both men emigrated from Naples around the same time, sharing a common heritage and background. They also shared a deep interest in the occult, which had a significant impact on their lives and actions. The violent and ritualistic nature of the crimes attributed to Angelino and Evangelista were eerily similar. In 1919, Angelino had brutally murdered his twin sons by battering their heads with a club, then hacking their bodies to pieces with a knife and axe, and fingerprints similar to Evangelista's were found at the scene. The savage and frenzied manner of these killings mirrored the horrific murders of the Evangelista family. However, the police could never definitively link Evangelista to the 1919 murders, and they found no conclusive proof to link Angelino to the massacre of the Evangelista family. The shadows of the Detroit Occult Murders seemed to vanish as soon as they're pursued. The investigators examined criminal organizations, religious fanatics, and occult practitioners, but they could never find evidence to support their theories. The savagery of the crime, the sinister ties to the occult, and the baffling clues left behind have kept this case cloaked in an impenetrable darkness. Each lead unraveled into a deeper enigma, and each suspect added layers of perplexity. This case, steeped in horror, insanity, and unanswered questions, still lingers in the annals of history. The true narrative behind the Evangelista murders remains frustratingly out of reach, hidden within a labyrinth of secrets and darkness, a mystery that might never be resolved. And what if the forces that once moved through St. Albans Street are still out there, waiting to emerge once more?